Hello everyone, and welcome to my video series on Introduction to Business. This week I will be taking a look at small businesses, entrepreneurships, and franchises. Because it is such a large percentage of the total volume of U.S. businesses that exist, I believe that it's beneficial to understand the profile of the small business and why so many of U.S. small businesses fail. Throughout this video, the content here is going to focus on how a majority of business firms in the United States that are classified as small businesses and many business professionals have been or will be employed in small companies or will be entrepreneurs themselves hopefully one day. The importance of small business in our economy is acknowledged here with respect to four main areas. Small businesses as sources of technical innovation, employers, spurs to competition, and specialized marketers. I'm also going to emphasize the importance of having a business plan and then going to look at the Small Business Administration. There are different forms of assistance that the SBA or Small Business Administration can offer to small firms, and it's great information if you're thinking about being an entrepreneur as to some of those advantages that you can take with your local small business administration. And then lastly, we'll take a look at franchising, which is an increasingly popular form of small business ownership. And then we'll conclude with a discussion on looking at the advantages and disadvantages of both, how that relates to the franchisee and the franchisor. So let's go ahead and dive right in now. Now, according to the Small Business Administration, a small business is one in which is independently owned and operated for profit, and that it is not dominant in its field. If we take a closer look at small businesses, they actually represent about 99% of all employer firms. They also employ about half of all private sector employees. They have generated around 60% of the net new jobs over the last 25 years here in the U.S. They also create more than half of the non-farm private GDP. Small firms actually hire just under 40% of high-tech workers. And about half of the home-based businesses are small businesses. And they actually produce nearly 20 times more patents per employee than large patenting firms. So that's pretty impressive for the actual small business that is not dominant in its field, but it's dominant in a lot of areas. So moving on, we'll take a look at how it typically takes here in the U.S. less than a week and around $600 or so to establish a business as a legal entity. There are about 30 million businesses here in the U.S. and out of those businesses, only about just under 20,000 employ more than 500 workers, which is small to medium businesses. And we actually consider anything over 500 to be considered large. So over like the last 10 years, the number of small businesses here in the U.S. has increased almost 50%. Now, according to a study by the United States Small Business Administration, around 80% of new businesses survive around 2 years. So the survival of a small business is not real great. Of those small businesses, about 50% survive at least 5 years, and around a third of them survive at least 10 years. The primary reason for these failures is simply mismanagement resulting from a lack of business know-how of the small business owners. Industries that require only a low initial investment, so not a whole lot of capital, as well as some special skills or knowledge, tend to attract new businesses. Now, knowledgeable entrepreneurs choose areas in which they are familiar. It just makes sense. And these are most often the more established industries. I've got a few industries listed here that are dominated by small business, and you can read those. Real estate, rental, and leasing. Almost 75% of the businesses in that industry are small businesses. Leisure and hospitality services, over 60%. And the construction as a small business in the industry, almost 90% of that is dominated by small businesses. Now, the various kinds of businesses are generally grouped into these three broad categories: distribution services, service industries, and production industries. When it comes to distribution industries, this category is going to include such things as retailing, transportation, wholesale. These are industries that are concerned with the movement of goods from the producers of the goods to its end consumers. With service industries, this category is going to be a large portion of small businesses, nearly 50%. These are going to provide such things as non-financial services, some other financial services, and an increasing number of self-employed Americans are running service businesses from their home. They're not producing anything, they're just providing some type of service that there is a market for. And then the production industries. This category includes one that I mentioned earlier that's dominant in its field, and that's construction. We also see mining. Some manufacturing industries are also small businesses. So this total small businesses, the production industries makes up about just nearly 20% of all small businesses. Now let's talk about the entrepreneur. The United States here is quite entrepreneurial when we compare it to other countries in the world. And these small businesses are typically managed by people who are entrepreneurs. They started their own business. More than 70% of Americans would prefer to be an entrepreneur, to work for themselves rather than driving somewhere and clocking in or just reporting to someone else. When we look at the age for entrepreneurs, more than 70% of people who start their own businesses are going to be between 25 years old and 44 years old. Well, what makes up an entrepreneur? Well, there are lots of characteristics of entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurial spirit, this is that desire that one has to create a new business and be their own boss. Other personal factors that we can look at here that contribute to a small business success is independence, working for yourself, and the desire to determine one's own destiny. We also have a willingness to find and accept a challenge. They want a challenge, they want to face it head on and see if they can beat the odds. Maybe they have a family background in being an entrepreneur. That could be one of those factors as well. Age can be a factor, because what comes with that age is possibly motivation. That desire to start a business may come from, they lost a job. Maybe they just simply have a new idea for a new product. Or maybe they've got a hobby and they want to commercialize that hobby. And all that comes with age. Let's take a look now at women as small business owners. Here in the U.S., about 66% of the home-based businesses are owned by women. Women-owned businesses provide over 8 million jobs and generate over $1 trillion in sales each year. These women-owned businesses have proven that they are more successful, and more than 40% of these female-owned businesses here in the U.S. have been in business for greater than 12 years. If you remember what I said earlier about the longevity of small businesses, that is very astounding that they are in that small percentage of businesses that last longer than 10 years. There's lots of reasons for this too. When it comes to the businesses that are owned by the ladies, they are financially sound, and their risk of failure is much lower than the average. Now, compared to other working women, self-employed women are older, they're better educated, and they have more managerial experience. Now, while there are lots of contributing factors, such as the home-based business and how many jobs they provide, and obviously they've proven successful track record as business owners, there are factors that we don't even know, but all the evidence is there. They are proven successors in the small business world. Now, another group that a lot of times we don't think of, but here in the 21st century has become a boom, is the high-tech teen entrepreneurship. How that's definitely exploding, but just young entrepreneurs in general are becoming very effective. Young entrepreneurs must juggle such things as their social life, their school life, as well as a great high-tech workload. Knowledge and ability, especially management ability, are probably the most important factors that are involved with teenage small business owners. Entrepreneurship has been growing among immigrants. The percentage of persons born abroad who were self-employed increased nearly 6% to almost 7% over a span of 20 years. While that doesn't seem like a lot, when you think about the total number of small businesses, it is a very large number. Now, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of small businesses fail. So we got to look at why some of those businesses fail. Small businesses are prone to a failure. We have seen that for many, many years. Some of the key ingredients in the survival of a small business are going to include, how much capital is there? How about their management experience? How much planning is going into it? So while those are some generalities, some specifics are that small businesses can experience a number of money-related problems, such as that insufficient capital for the actual startup, and then once it's started up, having that continuous cash flow to be able to sustain it. Another one is, money, time, personnel, and the inventory need can be effectively managed if a small business is going to be successful. So if they can manage all of those, that is one key ingredient to their success. And then success and expansion sometimes leads to problem. You as the entrepreneur must plan carefully and adjust to potentially new and disruptive situations to make sure that you don't fail. Now, the small business industry is extremely important for many reasons. And let's take a look at some of those. One of the reasons of why small businesses are so important is that generally they are providing us a technical innovation. Different studies show us that the incidence of innovation among those small business workers is much higher than among workers that are employed in large businesses here in the U.S. Those small firms produce 2.5 times as many innovations as the larger firms relative to the number of persons employed. Small firms employ 37% roughly of all high-tech workers and produce many more patents per employee than large patenting firms. Now, more than half of the major technological advances of the 20th century originated with individual inventors and small companies, things that we don't really think about now, but like air conditioning was one of those innovative creations from the 20th century that was started in a small business by an entrepreneur. And the personal computer is probably the largest one of those technological advancements that was made in the 20th century by individual inventors. Another thing we look at is the employment that's provided by small businesses. Small businesses represent 90 plus percent of all employees. Employees over one half of the private sector workforce, and they provide about 2/3 of the net new jobs that are added to our economy each year. Small businesses provide almost 2/3 of workers with their first jobs and initial on-the-job training in those basic skills that workers need. They also hire a larger portion of employees who are the younger workforce. They also employ older workers, women, and workers who simply prefer to work part-time. Very essential in our workforce. And they also provide competition. Small businesses are going to challenge the much larger firms in lots of different ways, prompting those larger firms to become much more efficient and more responsive to their customer needs rather than settling on what they want to do and what has worked in the past. And then they fill needs of society as well as other businesses. Lots of large firms may be unwilling to meet the special needs of smaller groups of consumers. Those types of groups create almost perfect markets for small companies. Small businesses also provide a variety of goods and services to one another and to much larger firms. So if we think about this, with Ford Motor, they rely on thousands of companies for parts and suppliers and depend on more than thousands of independent dealers to sell its automobiles and trucks to its end customers. So they're very reliant on the small businesses that exist. Now let's move into talking about the advantages of small businesses. The first one we want to take a look at is the personal relationship with customers and employees. Now, the owners of retail shops get to know many of their customers simply by name because they deal with them on a very personal basis, which you don't get in a lot of larger companies. Through such relationships, these small business owners often become involved in social, political, cultural, different affairs within their communities that they serve. The personal service offered to customers is a major competitive weapon of those small businesses. As a small business, they also have the ability to adapt to change more easily. Being their own boss, the owner of a small business does not need anyone else's permission to be able to adapt to their changes that they occur as a business. Through customer relationships, owners are made more aware of changes in people's needs as well as the activities that are going on with their competitors, once again because of these personal relationships with their customers and their employees if they have employees in their small business. Another such advantage is the simplified record keeping. Many of the small businesses out there need to keep only a very simple set of records so they don't get into very complex data mining, record keeping, and having to have all these different documents that the large businesses deal with on a day-to-day basis on their operations. The small business also has the advantage of independence. These small business owners, they don't have to drive potentially or have to worry about any type of clock that they have to be part of. They don't have to do the punching in, punching out. They don't have to worry about can they take a vacation when they want to, or is someone with higher seniority going to get it, or is it going to be possibly canceled because of a work need because of customers needing more of the product and so they can't take it. They also don't have to take order from any superiors because they are their superior, and they don't have to worry about are they going to be fired for something they did or being laid off due to a downturn, because they have the independence of all of that. Some of the other advantages that we can take a look at too is the profit retention. They get to keep what the business earned after their expenses have been deducted. And another one that it's a small advantage is the low amount of capital that it takes to go into the business, how easy it is to get any type of local licensing or permits, So it's very easy to get into the business. Or if they need to get out of the business, they don't have to worry about partnerships or any type of legal documentation. They can close their business because it's theirs. And then lastly, the ability to keep business information secret. They don't have a lot of reporting like corporations have to do of their financials and stuff like that. So they get to keep that information secret from the general public. They don't have any stockholders. When we talk about advantages, we also have to talk about disadvantages. And one of the biggest ones that's a disadvantage of the small business owner is that risk of failure, because over 50% of those small businesses close their doors within the first 5 years, as I mentioned earlier. They also have limited potential. There's, many of these small businesses are simply the means by which an individual wants to make a living for themselves and their families. Such businesses are going to be unlikely to have much growth. Now, as I mentioned in another video, if you're not growing, you're essentially shrinking if you're not staying up with your environment. And then a lot of times this limited potential also has to do with the employees, because there's not much room for advancement. Now, there is a chance that they could take over the small business, but that's not generally the case. It's an individual basis. And then lastly, they have a very limited ability to be able to raise capital. They have this limited ability to obtain that because they don't have as many investors. It's being treated as an individual's income. Now let's move on to talk about the business plan. A business plan is a carefully constructed, let's just think of it as a guide for the person starting a business. If they may have potential investors, these investors may want to examine the business plan to determine if they would like to invest or help finance that business. So we need to have a very detailed business plan just in case we need to get that capital or means to start our business or to grow our business. This business plan needs to be easy to read. It doesn't need to be cluttered with information that's not pertinent to being able to look at it and see if it's a worthwhile investment, and it needs to be complete. When it comes to a business plan, we potentially have 3 different purposes for our business plan. First, obviously, is communication. This business plan is going to serve as a concise document that those potential investors are able to examine to see if they want to invest in the business. Another purpose is management. A business plan helps to track, monitor, and evaluate the progress of the business. It serves to establish timelines and milestones and allows comparison of different growth projections against what we've actually accomplished as a small business. And then the third basic purpose is that of planning. This business plan is going to guide the business person, the owner of the small business, through a various phases of business. So when that small business owner has completed a business plan, it should be able to answer 4 basic questions. What exactly are the nature and mission of this business? What is the new enterprise of this good idea? What are that business person's goals? And it all comes down to money. How much will that new venture cost? So there are several components that need to be part of a basic business plan. The first component obviously is an introduction. This is that basic introduction, such as what's the name, address, and phone number of that business. What is the date that the plan was issued? And then lastly, in the introduction, there needs to be a statement of confidentiality to keep important information away from potential competitors. The next component of the basic business plan is the executive summary. This is a 1 to 2 page general overview of the entire business plan that's to follow, and it's going to include a justification of why that business is going to succeed. The third component is the benefits to the community. This is information on how the business will have some type of impact on economic development, community development, and human development in that community which the business is going to serve. And the fourth component is company and industry information. This is the background of the company, the choice of the legal business form, information on the products or services that are going to be offered by this small business, and an examination of the potential customers, current competitors in the market, and the business's future. The fifth part of your business plan should include the management team section. This is going to be a discussion of skills, talents, and job descriptions of the management team, managerial compensation that's going to exist, management training needs that we've already identified, and professional assistance requirements of the business. The next component is going to be the manufacturing and operations plan. This is going to be a discussion of the facilities needed, any type of space requirements that exist, capital equipment, the labor force, inventory control, and any purchasing requirements. The seventh component is going to be that of the labor force. This is going to be a discussion of the quality of skilled workers available and the training, compensation, and the overall motivation of its workers. You need to also include your marketing plan. This is going to be a discussion of the market trends, any competition, the market shares, pricing, promotions, and distribution and services policy for your business. There's also going to be the financial plan area. This is going to be a summary of the investments needed, sales and cash flow forecasts, a break-even analysis, and different sources of funding. The 11th component you need to make sure is in your business plan is the critical risks and assumptions. So you want to make sure that this is an evaluation of the weaknesses of the business and how the company plans to deal with these identified weaknesses and potentially other business problems. I realize I skipped over the exit strategy. This is going to be included as well. As I mentioned before, exiting a small business is much easier than a corporation or a partnership. So here in your exit strategy, there needs to be a discussion of a succession plan, or even if you're going to possibly go public, who's going to take over the business. And then lastly, we need the appendix. This is just like you would think it is. It's a supplementary information that's crucial to the plan, such as resumes of owners and principal managers, advertising samples, an organizational chart of the small business, and any other related information that doesn't pertain to those other areas, but are also helpful in your investors and anyone that's going to provide you some type of financial assistance to be able to look to overview your business. Now, I've mentioned the Small Business Administration a few times already. The Small Business Administration, now this was created by Congress back in the early 50s, 1953 specifically. And it's just a governmental agency that assists, counsels, and projects the interests of the small businesses here in the United States. It helps people get into business, and it helps them to try to stay in business. So make sure you utilize your Small Business Administration. It's going to help get into business and stay into business in several different ways. The agency is also going to provide assistance to owners and managers of those prospective, new, and established small businesses. So not only those that are looking to get into business, people that have been established, and people that are just relatively new. So tries to keep those small businesses alive. The Small Business Administration management assistance includes free individual counseling, courses, conference workshops, and a wide range of various publications for the small business owners. The management courses offered by the Small Business Administration cover all of the functions, duties, and roles of managers. As I stated before, the management portion is one reason, and a major reason, why small businesses fail. The Service Corp of Retired Executives, or also known as SCORE, is a group of more than 10,000 retired business people who just want to volunteer their services to small businesses through the various small business administrations. A small business owner can request some free counseling from the SCORE. There are experts in all areas of business, such as accounting, engineering, marketing, finance, and retailing, so they can provide this counseling and a mentorship to these new entrepreneurs or these small businesses. So I can't emphasize enough, if you are deciding to go into a small business, to create a small business, or even purchase an existing small business, take advantage of the U.S. Small Business Administration and what they have to offer. The Small Business Administration, or we may just refer to it as the SBA, makes a special effort to assist those minorities and women who want to start small businesses or expand their existing ones. The Minority Business Development Agency awards the grants and financial assistance to develop and increase these small businesses that are minority and women owned. Small Business Institutes are one form of this. This is a group of senior and graduate students in business administration who provide management counseling to various small businesses. The Small Business Institutes have been set up on more than 520 college campuses throughout the United States. There's also the Small Business Development Centers. These are a university-based group that provide individual counseling and practical training to owners of small businesses. These are primarily at colleges and universities assisting small business, and there are over 900 locations throughout the U.S. Then, as I mentioned a little bit ago, there is the Small Business Administration publications that exist. The SBA is going to issue marketing, management, technical publications dealing with hundreds of topics to present to prospective managers of small firms. I would be remiss in discussing small business if I did not mention a franchise. While some people don't think or view a franchise as a small business, that is a great way to enter into a small business. A franchise is just a license to operate an individually owned business as though it were part of a chain of outlets of stores. An example of business that's really a larger one. An example of this would include like a McDonald's franchise or a Dairy Queen or an H&R Block. We see those, we associate the big name, but those are going to be franchises. So they are just a part of a chain of outlets of stores. And typically we will just call that business the franchise. Oh, like this is the McDonald's franchise of such and such city. When it comes to franchise, how do you get into it? Well, that's franchising. Franchising is the actual granting of a franchise. It is built of a couple components. The franchisor is an individual or organization granting the franchise. And who do they grant that to? They grant that to the franchisee. Now the franchisor, this individual or organization that grants the franchisee the license, they're going to supply different things. They are going to supply some type of known and advertised business name, such as McDonald's. They're going to supply their franchisee with proven management skills and the required training and materials to help make them successful. They're essentially giving them a method of doing business successfully, so they're not starting from scratch and going through struggles that many other people have already gone through. So they're giving them that successful business plan and knowledge to be successful. Now, I said the franchisee is that person or even an organization that purchases that franchise They're going to supply the labor and the capital for the business. They're going to operate that business, and they're going to agree to abide by the provisions of the franchisee agreement. So there's a lot that goes into it, but they're essentially given a successful plan that if they follow it in the right market, then they can be successful as a small business owner. Well, there are advantages and disadvantages, just like there is with any other business. And here we're going to look at advantages to the franchisor and to the franchisee. The franchisor gains fast and well-controlled distribution of its products without incurring any of the high costs of constructing and operating its own outlets, because the franchisee is taking on that cost. And the franchisor is also going to benefit from the fact that the franchisee is a highly motivated individual who wants to succeed, usually a sole proprietor, and the success of that franchise means more sales, which translates into higher royalties for that franchisor that they're going to get from the franchisee. Now, the advantages that the franchisee has is that they get the opportunity to start a business with limited capital and to make use of the business experience of others that have already faulted and how to fix those faults. So if a problem arises, the franchisor gives the franchisee guidance and advice. And lastly, with the franchisee, they receive materials to use in local advertising and can take part in national promotional campaigns sponsored by the franchisor. So if there's a big movie that's going on and McDonald's is providing some type of toy that is helping promote the movie, but it's also getting people that are interested in that movie to come to their store, well, these franchisees are going to get those toys and from the franchisor, and then they're going to be part of that national marketing that's going to attract its local customers. Well, now let's talk about the disadvantages. The disadvantages of franchising mainly affect the franchisee because the franchisor retains a great deal of control. Now, the franchisor's contract can dictate every aspect of the business. So we look at a couple of these disadvantages specifically. Conflicts between the franchisees and the franchisors are not uncommon. There can be contract disputes, and this can create lawsuits. And this is what we see a lot of when it comes to the main disadvantage of franchisees. Another one is that franchise holders typically pay a one-time franchise fee plus continuing royalty and advertising fees collected as a percentage of their sales. Another is that the franchise operators must work hard, often putting in very long days, several days a week, beyond the normal work schedule of someone who has a job at like a corporation or a larger business. Sometimes a franchise is so successful that their franchisor opens its own outlet nearby and creates direct competition with their franchisee. And lastly, the International Franchise Association advises prospective franchise purchasers to investigate before investing and to exercise caution before buying into that franchise. If you're giving some thought to getting a franchise, then talk to other franchisees to find out what difficulties they may have or are currently experiencing, to know that if you want to get into that market. Now, obviously, you're not going to go to one that's in your relative area. You want to go beyond that, because why would you open up a franchise that already exists in your local area? One of the things that is beautiful right now is that technology now gives small businesses the leverage and power to reach markets that were once limited solely to larger corporations. I've talked about the Small Business Administration and how it offers to help the nation's small business owners who want to enter the world markets. So not only locally, but world markets. International trade will become more important to small business owners as they face the various unique challenges here in the new century, and Small Business Administration helps with that. There are lots of different new technologies that help make that international trade a reality for the small business owners, and having a firm foundation of what small business entrepreneurship and franchises means will help make those people successful. Always utilize the tools that are available to you and think about the communities that you're going to serve. That is it for my lesson on small business entrepreneurship and franchises. Thank you for following along in my introduction to business videos.